Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder about the quiet moments and how they might affect us, especially when we're going through a tough time? Today we're diving into a fascinating study about momentary stress and social context among adolescents at risk for suicide. So suicide is a really big problem for teenagers. And sadly, the rates have been going up. Scientists are desperately trying to figure out why and how to help. A major clue they keep finding is that stress, especially stressful interactions with others, plays a huge role in suicidal thoughts and actions. But the big question is, are all stresses created equal? And how does being alone versus being with people change things? That is what this study wanted to explore. Think about it. Theories about suicide often point to stress as a trigger. It's like stress can be the spark that ignites suicidal ideation, or pushes someone from just thinking about it to acting on it. We know that adverse childhood experiences, conflict, discrimination, abuse, and rejection are all linked to suicidal thoughts and behaviors. But a lot of this research relies on people remembering things from the past. Scientists are realizing that we need to see what's happening in the moment to really understand how risk builds up. That is where technology comes in. This study used something called ecological momentary assessment, or EMA. Basically, it means people got frequent little surveys on their phones throughout the day. This is a great way to catch those fleeting moments of stress and see how they connect to what is going on in a person's life and their mood. Previous studies using EMA have shown that negative life events can lead to suicidal thoughts the next day. But most research has focused only on suicidal thoughts, not necessarily suicidal behaviors like attempts. This study wanted to see if stress could predict actual suicidal events. A really important part of this study is that it looked at where these stresses happened. Are you stressed when you're alone? Or maybe when you're dealing with family? Or perhaps with friends? Most theories about suicide stress are based on adult research and don't always break down these social contexts. This is crucial because adolescence is a time when relationships with peers and family are changing so much. So, the researchers got a bunch of teenagers, some who had struggled with suicidal thoughts or behaviors, and some who hadn't but had other mental health issues. They used these smartphone surveys to ask them about their stress levels and who they were spending time with at different points in the day for about a week. And then they followed them for 6 months to see if anything happened. They recruited over 200 adolescents, aged 13 to 18, from the New York and Pittsburgh areas. These teens had diagnoses like depression, anxiety, or substance use disorders. To make sure they had enough data on people at risk, they actually oversampled participants who had a history of suicidal thoughts or behaviors. So they had two main groups, the STB group, who had experienced suicidal thoughts or behaviors, and psychiatric controls, who had mental health issues but no history of suicidal thoughts or behaviors. Here is how the smartphone part worked. For 7 days after initial assessments, or just before a follow-up, they got these short surveys. On weekdays, they'd get 4 a day at 4, 6, 8, and 10 p.m. On weekends, they got more at 10 a.m., noon, 2 p.m. And then again later, each survey asked, "How are you feeling right now?" with words like angry, anxious, calm, sad, and importantly, stressed. They used a scale from 0 to 100 to rate it. Then they were asked, "Over the last few hours, who have you spent the most time with options like alone, family, friends, or partner. For analysis, they grouped friends, partner, co-workers, and co-students, all into a peers category because some of those options weren't used very often. This way, they could compare being alone with family or with peers more easily. They also calculated average positive and negative affect scores based on other emotion words in the survey. Like any study, they had to clean up the data. They removed duplicate answers, surveys that took too long or were too short, or ones where someone just randomly clicked the same answer for everything. They also excluded participants who didn't respond to enough surveys, making sure they had a decent amount of daily data from each person. Now, for the interesting stuff, they used some pretty complex statistical models called Bayesian multi-level regression models to look at the data. These models are good for tracking things over time and accounting for individual differences. One of their first big findings was how the STB group and the control group spent their time. The teens in the STB group spent significantly more time alone compared to the psychiatric control group. They also spent less time with family. Interestingly, there wasn't a big difference in the amount of time they spent with peers. On top of that, the STB group reported higher levels of stress throughout their day. They also experienced more negative emotions like sadness and anger, and less positive emotions like happiness and confidence compared to the control group. Now, let's talk about how social context affected stress. Across all participants, they found that people generally reported less stress when they were with peers compared to when they were alone. And they reported even less stress when they were with peers compared to when they were with family. So, spending time with peers seemed to be the most beneficial for reducing stress. Interestingly, being with family didn't seem to reduce stress as much as being with peers, and it wasn't significantly different from being alone. This might suggest that the quality of interaction could be more important than just the presence of others. This is a really key finding. When they looked at the interaction between being alone versus being with others, and whether someone was in the STB group or the control group, they found something important. For the control group, spending time with others seemed to reduce their stress more than when they were alone. But for the STB group, this stress-reducing effect of being with others was smaller. It suggests that for teens at risk for suicide, social interactions might not buffer stress as effectively. Now, for the crucial part, did these momentary stress levels and social contexts predict future suicidal events over the next 6 months? They made sure to see if their findings held up even after accounting for the fact that some participants already had a history of suicidal thoughts or attempts. This is important because we want to know if momentary stress can predict new or ongoing risk, not just reflect existing risk. Drumroll, please. They found that higher average momentary stress measured in the first week after the study started was significantly linked to a greater chance of experiencing a suicidal event in the following 6 months. This is a big deal. It suggests that real-time stress is a predictor of future suicide attempts or hospitalizations for suicidal concerns. They also used another statistical method called Cox regression, which looks at the timing of events. This confirmed that higher stress levels predicted that a suicidal event would happen sooner. It's worth noting that while momentary stress was a predictor, it wasn't more predictive than looking at the person's overall lifetime history of stress and adversity. This suggests that both immediate stress and long-term stress experiences matter. Interestingly, the amount of time spent alone on its own wasn't a significant predictor of future suicidal events in this particular analysis. This might mean that it is not just being alone, but how you feel when you are alone, or what you're experiencing in those alone moments that's more critical. The study also looked at negative affect, which included feelings like sadness, anger, and loneliness. They found that higher negative affect was also a significant predictor of suicidal events, even after accounting for previous stress exposure. This makes a lot of sense, as feeling bad emotionally is strongly linked to suicidal risk. On the flip side, positive affect, like feeling happy or confident, didn't show a significant protective effect against suicidal events in this study. This doesn't mean positive emotions aren't important, but it highlights stress and negative emotions as more direct risk indicators in this context. So, what does all this mean? This study strongly supports the idea that we need to pay attention to momentary stress, not just past experiences. We learned that how stressed teens feel depends on who they're with. Stress was often higher when they were alone or with family than with peers. This really emphasizes that the social setting matters, and the most crucial takeaway, momentary stress levels predicted future suicidal events. This suggests that using these smartphone-based assessments, EMA, could be a really valuable tool for catching kids who are at risk in real time. The fact that teens at risk spent more time alone and less time with peers also raises questions. Is it that their increased stress leads them to isolate themselves? Or do existing mental health issues like depression make them want to withdraw? Or perhaps, do they have fewer quality friendships that make them feel supported? While other studies have linked stress to suicidal thoughts, this study seems to be one of the first to show a direct link between momentary stress and actual suicidal behaviors over a 6-month period. This is vital because the factors that lead to thinking about suicide might be different from the factors that lead to attempting suicide. Now, like all research, this study has its limitations. For one, they measured momentary stress, but didn't always know the specific reason for that stressor. Was it a fight with a parent, a tough school assignment, or something else? More detailed information about the actual stressors would be helpful. They also couldn't look at the most immediate connections, like stress happening just hours before a suicidal event. Future studies might benefit from even more frequent check-ins. A big challenge with EMA studies is getting people to consistently respond. Not everyone participated in every survey, and the reasons why data might be missing aren't always clear. This is something that needs to be considered when interpreting the results. Also, the study primarily included female adolescents and was mostly composed of white participants. Suicide risk factors can differ significantly between genders and different racial and ethnic groups. So, while this is a really important study, we need more research with diverse groups of young people to make sure these findings apply broadly. Overall, this research makes a powerful case for using smartphone assessments to understand the moment-to-moment experiences of adolescents and how they connect to suicide risk. It highlights that the context of our stress, especially our social relationships, matters. It's a step forward in figuring out how to better identify and support young people who are struggling. It tells us that paying attention to how someone feels right now and who they are with could be key to prevention. What do I think about this study? I find it incredibly promising. The use of MI to capture real-time data is revolutionary in its potential to intervene early. The finding that momentary stress predicts future suicidal events is a critical piece of evidence that our daily experiences have a profound impact on our long-term safety. The distinction between stress levels with peers versus family is also really intriguing and suggests that support systems are complex. While the limitations are real, particularly regarding the diversity of the sample, the study's strength in its methodology and the clarity of its predictive findings are significant. Future research should absolutely focus on replicating these findings in more diverse populations and potentially exploring the role of digital social interactions, which are so prevalent in adolescent life. Understanding the specific types of stressors adolescents face within these different social contexts will also be crucial. Thanks for joining me on RUBIN'S Mind Lab. If you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe for more insights into the amazing world of psychology. See you next time.